So I'd like to just say hello, DNN Summit. My name is Jason, and it's great to be here. This is my first DNN Summit ever. So I was really glad that this virtual ability for me to be able to join from Canada was able to be here. But one of the things that I like to do when I start this particular session is break down a little bit, be a little more vulnerable. And for me, that means using song, because we all know Mr. Rogers had certain key elements, and song was a way that he went about things. So for me, it's about how to say hello. And he always did this in his show, where he would come in and say, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, a beautiful day to be neighbors. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor? Now, you may be wondering why I'm doing all of this kind of Mr. Rogers bit with the sweater and my good friend Trolley here. I wanted to talk today about trust. I want to talk about how we can use our marketing to connect with audiences, to build relationships, build trusted relationships. And when I start thinking about, being kind, treating others well, for me, that brings me back to my days as a kid when I was watching Mr. Rogers, growing up on that show. Now, I first tackled this particular theme back at the end of 2019. And the world was a bit of a different place then, right? I mean, Tom Hanks's Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood was about to come out, and the year before there'd been the documentary on his life. So it was the right time. And then 2020 happened. It was no longer some fun, nostalgic thing anymore. It kind of became a business imperative. I mean, the idea of transparency, trust, kindness. Marketing teams needed to reevaluate how they were connecting with an audience. How did they go about marketing? So customers were demanding things like social responsibility, standing up for certain things, more than ever before. So everybody was having to channel just a little bit of Mr. Rogers, right? Both in their own personal lives, but also professionally. How do we all come together? So when I was growing up as a kid, watching shows like Mr. Rogers or things like that, there was an approach that was done with those shows about being honest, not speaking down to kids, being able to connect with people, to learn, but also to help. And see how the world works and how to handle difficult things. And a lot of that show is about how do we build a trusted relationship from one central point of contact out to many, creating an audience that trusts the message that's coming to them. Now, there's a professional influencer, Tamara McCleary. She speaks a lot about how you can control your individual brand. And one of the things she talks about is, what are the 3 things that people are going to say about you behind your back? And how can you control that? So when you're going out and you want to have 3 adjectives about you, what do you want those adjectives to be? How do you go about when you write a blog, you create a video, you're doing some kind of marketing asset? How do you create your brand and reinforce and control what those adjectives are going to be? So based on that idea, I kind of took this Mr. Rogers, beautiful quote, by the way, but used some of my amazing Microsoft Paint skills to update this for 3 adjectives I think we should build if we're aiming to build trust. And that's to be honest, to be kind, and to be helpful. And that's what I want to spend time on today. I want to be able to talk about how we can do this, how we can help the organizations that we work for, and how ultimately there are some challenges in doing that. Now, to start off, obviously, we need to address, why does trust even matter at all? And how does the concept of advocacy and being an advocate get into this? Now, the base problem that ultimately drives a lot of this is that there's this huge cloud of doubt and fear. And it started with things like privacy, things like the surveillance state, large data breaches, privacy legislations, a lot of people concerned about what's going on. And then we had things spill over more into the other aspects of our lives about, how are people going to be safe? How are people going to get food? Like, we had a lot of doubt, a lot of mistrust. And everybody started being extra vigilant. So it became this thing where brand trust was now a differentiator because consumers were looking for someone they could trust. And the brands that built that trust up, well, the customers would stay with them. And the brands that started violating trust, you've heard of cancel culture, right? Like, you lose. It's simple math at this point, right? You build the trust, you're going to be able to keep people. So ultimately, that's a business problem that as a marketing team, you would try to solve. Now, what happened is a lot of organizations focused in on meeting privacy legislation needs, which was absolutely necessary. And you can show you take data seriously, you take customers seriously, and you worry about how this is going to be treated, and you're being serious, right? So a company that tackles this works really well as an organizational trust perspective. But what about an individual, right? So you and me, how do we go about building up trust? We're clearly not necessarily the ones handling private data. Sometimes we are, but ultimately that's not our role, right? An organization does that. So this is where I believe we bring individual advocacy into play. Lots of data has gone out and shown that there's a huge impact of having an individual employee at a company going out, participating in advocacy and sharing information. The point here that's here from a 2017 report was about reactions. How do you get that engagement? And if an individual does something versus a corporate brand, you get much more engagement. People want to interact with someone like them, not with the corporate social brand. And this goes beyond just getting engagement. The credibility piece is also there. So this is an Edelman Trust Barometer piece from 2019, where they started looking at the types of credibility that built up. So something like a technical company expert could build a lot more trust and credibility than an executive. Now, this does have some nuances to it. Obviously, it's not that executives are not trusted, but a lot of messages that go out are not executive targeted. So if you have a message you want to send to an executive, it makes sense for that to come from an executive. If you have a message to a practitioner or a developer or someone like that, someone that's more like them deals with a lot more credibility. So ultimately what we're trying to do is we have an audience, and depending on who we're trying to reach, we need to use someone who they're going to believe, that they're going to trust, knows about their problems. So we've got this idea of getting engagement, the idea of credibility. Then there was an idea of like, how do we just get to as many people as possible? So Hootsuite did this report with Altimeter. They looked at just not doing social ads and instead focusing on employee advocacy, gaining people to go out and talk about what they do, talk about their company. They had this 28% increase in who they could reach, how many people they could reach without doing any ads. So you have this ability to reach a wider network by bringing your teams along for the ride and getting everybody kind of involved in it, not just thinking about things as a corporate brand. And something that became really relevant over the past year was building trust through things like ethics. So when the 2020 Edelman Trust Report came out, it started showing that trust was in a crisis. People really needed to see more than just competence. They started asking for ethical behavior. And it became that 76% of a company's trust capital was actually on things like integrity, purpose, dependability. Consumers wanted to know that you were a brand that stood for something, that knew where they were going to go. And they also wanted you to be good at what you were doing, but that was a lesser factor. And interestingly, earlier I talked about how a technical person could have more credibility. With this type of messaging, it was actually the executive message of support that had more weight because they had more of an impact on the organization actually following through on those ideas of integrity. So again, this comes back to the idea of what's the message you want to send? Who should be the person who sends that? And being able to have different messages that connect with different people. Now, let's say that you decided, okay, sounds good, Jason, trust is awesome. I want to go do advocacy. Well, what does that mean, right? What do I do with that? And there's a couple of different styles I've tried to capture in kind of 4 categories. The idea of a customer advocate is someone who is there to listen. They're going out, and their customer might be a marketer, that might be a developer. You want to listen for feedback. You want to advocate for them back to whatever brand it is that they're interacting with. And then the flip side, when you talk about a brand advocate, this is where you're going out and talking about how awesome something is. And I've done this myself. I used to use Team City for continuous integration, Trello for agile planning. I'd write blogs about, cool things I did with these tools. I didn't work for them. They didn't owe me anything, but I was out there wanting to share what I could do. Building up groups of brand advocates is a great way to have a lot of credibility and a lot of trust in the message that's being sent. And similar to a brand advocate is the idea of an employee advocate. So this would be somebody who works at the company. They probably have access to some kind of like internal cool things, maybe information that's not out there. And they can go and share that out. And as an individual at the company, they have a higher credibility, but they also have a little bit of a self-interest on it. So it kind of works against them a little bit. And then you have the influencer. The influencer might not even know what the product is, might not have ever used it, but what they're really good at is reaching people and connecting with an audience. So they have this great ability for you to get a message out. Might be a little bit of, credibility issue with them. Now you might wind up doing a mix of these. So for example, in a previous role, I was doing more brand advocacy with a little bit of employee advocacy for the organization I was with. And then now I'm probably more of an employee advocate with a little bit of brand advocacy. And so you kind of find the balance that works for you and what you want to be able to do. Now, ultimately, how do we maximize this? And of course, there's an algorithm on the internet for that. What I'm showing here is an algorithm that shows how do you maximize that trust. And it comes down to three key things. So credibility, where you are trusted that what you're saying is actually true. And that you know about this field you're talking about. Then empathy, where you understand your audience and what they're going through, and you're willing to think about their side of things. And then how useful is what you're doing. So, having messages that just aren't about, please download my latest thing, but like, here's how you can use, how you're going towards a helpfulness. All of these build up trust. And underneath that, is anytime you're being self-serving in this, people kind of erode away at that trust that you're building up. So you're constantly having to build this battle of I want to share what I'm excited about, but it's also probably pretty obvious I have some self-interest in this. How do I overcome how much self-interest is in there by building up credibility, empathy, and helpfulness? So at this point, you've kind of seen the executive summary about like, what's the value? What are we going to do? How do we build up trust? And what I want to do with the rest of our time together is to dig into each of these. How do we go about with examples of like a credibility or empathy and helpfulness? And I think what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how can we be honest? How can we be kind? How can we be helpful and build up that brand trust? So tackling the first thing, let's go after credibility. We want to make sure that you're sharing about something that you know about, or that you can build up and be honest about the information that you're sharing in your marketing message. And the question is, how do we actually do this? Right? It's obvious. If you want to be trusted, don't go around lying. The more you are deceitful, the less likely people are going to trust you. But giving complete honest opinions and transparency, it's not always easy, but the industry research backs it up that this is the number one driver. The more transparent you are, the more consumers, the more other CMOs, they're going to see this as the key piece that you should be driving for. Now, when I say it's not always easy, it's like it's not always about a truth or a lie. There's a lot of gray in between because we're in competitive landscapes. We have professional obligations to our organization. There's information we have we probably shouldn't share. So the question becomes, is honesty actually the best policy in all scenarios? So I think that when we look at this, the being honest part is a bit of a balancing act, right? We're trying to find an appropriate harmony between, being someone who's really easy to work with, and you feel like someone can come to you and you'll give them what they need, and also respecting your fellow colleagues' personal privacy and not sharing corporate information. And there's all these like legal requirements about what can and can't be shared. They keeps pushing us towards this being safe, to the point a lot of people don't say anything. But we have this obligation when we're building brand trust and being an advocate to being a trusted advisor, right? We're there with them and we're giving them information that's going to be helpful. And you're doing this, and it's so exhausting. Try to balance this mentally. It's a bunch of gymnastics you're trying to do, and sometimes you're doing it on the fly, right? You're on a stage, you're on camera, someone's got a question. What are you going to do? Now, media training teaches all kinds of dodge and weave ways to like bridge away from questions so that you can kind of take it to a sidebar later, or just avoid the concept altogether. And that's great if you're just trying to dodge and be safe, but it doesn't help with being open. So what I'd like to do is kind of take us through a scenario, something that's kind of similar to what I do when I work with technical communities. We're going to do a little bit of a question that comes in, and then how we might be able to answer it, and then how we can go about being safe and being open, and ultimately reaching to something that sounds kind of better and might be more trusted. So the question goes like this. Somebody in the audience really jazzed up about a new tech, probably some new JavaScript framework I haven't heard of, and they're asking, are we going to support that? Okay, so I could go for the laugh. I could respond with something like, yeah, it's total garbage. I told them we shouldn't waste our time on it, but turns out they disagree and we're going to have it by the end of the year. Yay, I sound completely unprofessional, and I'm probably not building trust by doing that, but maybe I got a laugh. It's not the type of thing that you would want someone who's representing an org to say. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this. We're going to little by little apply the filters that I was talking about earlier, where we're being safe, being open. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is that being easy to work with. And this is about building a relationship with your audience, right? You want someone to be invited in to collaborate with you. You want to have a continued contact. You don't want to be negative. You don't want to shut things down. So I mentioned things about saying that it was garbage tech. Well, this person who's asked this question is clearly interested in it, and maybe they're excited. Now I'm being very negative about something that they like. That's not going to create a connection. So how do I bring this about and be more collaborative with it? So one of the things I can do is I can just drop all that negative language and use phrases like, thanks for bringing that up. That's a great question. Make it feel like, yes, I love that you asked that question and I'm happy to talk about it. And get rid of all the negativity, be very positive. And if there's any way to start asking questions of them to get them into a conversation and have them share their excitement, this builds a little bit more of a rapport between you. Now, the other piece that I did in that answer was I started kind of throwing Sarah and engineering under the bus, saying that, I talked with her about it. I don't think Sarah's going to particularly enjoy that, and she's probably not going to work with me again on things or tell me about anything that's happening. So I kind of have, on the being safe perspective, I need to respect some of that, not name dropping specific people. Try to, especially not their contact information, keep names out of it if you can. Try to be more generic, non-committal. This is a good way for us to interact with people. We're still being honest about things, but we're not, really throwing everybody under the bus. And the other part of being safe happens with corporate information that you're not supposed to share. So, for example, I said, yeah, we'll have support out by the end of the year. Was anybody supposed to actually know that? What if engineering hasn't decided on that yet completely? What if business priorities change and we have to do something else? So now I'm putting engineering in a situation where they're stuck. I've said something, something is going to go wrong. So I can go maybe a little more generic, this is something I'm not supposed to go up, keep things open about how we're going to look for the best option. That's a way that I can go about answering the question without, putting my engineering team in a bad position. But I've taken a lot out. So I started from at least saying something honest about how I felt. And now I have come down to, I'm saying almost nothing. It's clean, but it's not going to build me trust. So how do I provide that kind of insight about why I didn't like something and how can I remain positive? So instead of saying something like, oh, it's garbage tech, I looked at a particular use case for production and didn't really work in that scenario, right? What was the specific issues that I had? Nailing it down to specifics so that maybe that's a situation the person had not considered before. And if there's a capability of me to provide options, then in that scenario, I can say, well, maybe for production, I would have looked at something like this. What do you think, right? So at this point now, I've established that, yes, not only do I know about what they're talking about, I know about particular use cases that could be useful. I'm building up my credibility here. But I'm still sharing that honest feedback that I have. I'm not trying to be totally safe. So I'm going out there and providing my opinions, my honesty on it. And that's a transparency that I can give and start building up trust again. And then there's legal stuff. So now some people treat NDAs and the need for corporate sensitive information as a negative. Like it's keeping me from talking about stuff. But it's also an opportunity. So for things like the DNN MVPs and stuff like that, you create a community that is close, that you can trust. And if you can put these folks into that kind of a trusted legal arrangement, you can start being really open with them about things that maybe they didn't know about or that you can share. And if you can do this with your various customer audiences, creating these trusted groups, then you can really build connections with a subset. The one key here is to make sure you're being specific about what's protected, because a lot of what you might be saying is totally fine for everyone to share. And people are going to say, well, everything's okay to share that you just told me, or nothing's okay to share. They're not sure. So being specific is really key here, so that you can also say, okay, this particular release date, that's not widely known. Please don't tell anyone. But the other stuff you can share. That specificity is really going to help. So we've walked through an example now of a very specific scenario, a question asked about a tech, and I'm able to answer it. And when we look back at what's there, the original question was, is honesty always the best policy? And I would say that maybe no is the answer. I would say we have to go for more of a controlled truth. So if there's an opportunity to be 100% transparent and honest, absolutely go for it. If you have something that you can share, do it. You're going to build trust with it. But there's filters we have to apply. We have to remain ethical. We have to meet both our audience's needs, but also our professional needs of our organizations. So we may not be able to share everything. So finding that balance is going to be that controlled truth that we want to get out. So that's a bit on honesty, transparency, and building credibility. And the next pillar we looked at was, how do we build empathy into ourselves and our messaging and how we connect with an audience? And I believe this is where we bring kindness into marketing. This is where we can go and start being part of our community. And it's less about crushing the competition, right, and winning at all costs. That is a competitive landscape that we sit in, and there's very much a need for that. But consumers are kind of tired of it. They don't really want us shouting all the time about, this is an amazing new thing, right? There's constant pushing. Consumers want it to be easier. And that's not exactly easy in and of itself to do. But ultimately, I believe when we're being kind with an audience, what we're trying to do is say, you can work with me. I'm going to respect you. And this is going to be a great experience. We're going to have fun together, right? That's what we're trying to achieve. How do we build marketing to do that, right? And it's very much a long game approach. We're looking at trying to create a lasting relationship, long-term benefits, instead of any kind of short-term satisfaction. And that's tough to do. We are trying to create a connection. We are trying to go beyond the campaign. How do we build something that goes beyond the campaign? How do we make it so someone feels comfortable when they hear from you, that they feel good that you reached out to them, or that when they interact with your brand next, that they actually want to go and interact with you and reach out to you? That's what we're trying to do with kindness. Now, this helps with making people want to work with you in terms, but we've also got the concept of people want to work with you literally, right? They've done studies where people will leave for the exact same job to go to an organization that is more empathetic. It's a huge value to people where they work. So if you're building an organization that has this kind of empathetic scenarios, their messaging goes out, you're not only going to draw customers to you, you're going to draw employees. So there's a huge benefit in having your marketing have this, because your messaging goes out and people start realizing you're a brand that they want to be associated with. So like with the last one, I want to look at a specific example, how this can work. Now, I spend a lot of my time with technical communities, interacting with them on Slack, being able to be up there where they are in maybe Stack Exchange or Twitter or wherever it might be. And one of the most common examples where I can think kindness would play is the problem somebody needs help. They've got a specific problem, they need help with it. The open source community has been amazing about this, about creating communities that work together. And ultimately, I think there's two pieces that make this successful. One is, where do I go for help? Being able to make that beacon where people go, this is the place. I go to these forums, or I go to this Slack, or I go to this person on Twitter. Those beacons are that's kind of where you're building up your credibility, and you're doing helping activities that get people to know where to go. But the second piece, which is the ultimate linchpin in this, is the safe space. People have a question, they know where to go, but if that place is not welcoming, is toxic, or is just a place nobody feels comfortable asking a question, the entire thing falls apart. It doesn't matter how many experts you have available, because the question won't be asked. And ultimately, that means the connection has failed. You're never even going to hear from this person. So building kindness into a community, being able to create safe spaces, it's going to keep us from eroding away at the trust that we have, eroding away at community feeling. So we want to do this. But that example kind of was based on you being an expert at something. And there's ways to be an advocate without having expertise in a particular thing. And I find that this is where we can really get all employees being engaged, is that you don't need expertise. You can be passionate about something. Like maybe it's your dog, maybe it's windsurfing, maybe it's about the latest drone that you just started flying. There's all these different ways that you can be passionate about something, that you can be excited. And you go out there and that builds excitement in other people, and you start drawing people who have the same excitement, and they're coming to you, and you can connect on this. Another way that you can do about building connections with folks is being open, right? You want to be able to show that if someone asks you something, that they're going to get answers, that you're open to having questions come to you. And this builds up a trust as you start doing this. You can also go about things in terms of how do you support social responsibility or social impact. Maybe you volunteer. Maybe you donate to charities. Maybe there's a particular social cause that you really back. By being a little bit vulnerable and showing what you care about, that also builds up trust with an individual. They start seeing, oh, you care about other people, and you care about things in the same way I care about things. And you can align with your audience in that way. This helps with your overall brand image and how you are going to build trust with your audience. Now that we've looked at being honest and being kind, I want to talk to the one that's probably the easiest for all of us to do, because we naturally want to be helpful. Usually we're only not being helpful because we don't have time. So by being helpful is a huge piece to changing how marketing works. It's not just about blasting a message, but how do we be useful? Our industry that we work in, it's not exactly cookie cutter, right? I mean, you can have decades of experience, and things that are brand new you've never seen before still pop up. You've got technology changing. The problems that are changing. Solutions for them are changing. It's literally impossible for you to know everything. This means we need helpers. We need people who are willing to go learn and then share what they've learned. And this is making everything better for everyone. And again, the open source community has known about this for a while, with developers working together and helping each other. And we need to have this same feeling in marketing. How do we bring that about so that we're helping people with the messages we deliver? Now, all of us know about building partnerships and communities, a neighborhood, if you will. And one of the big benefits is that everybody who's in that community can help out. It's not just this small cabal of elders, right? Everybody has something they know about. Everybody can reach out and support. Now, if we're going to go about doing this, we also have to make a business argument for it. When we discuss kindness, what is the business argument for it? When we discuss, honesty, what are the business implications of this? And being helpful also has to do that. How do you gravitate people to you and make this a business imperative? One of the ways that we do this is building a memory of success. So by helping someone else, they then start tying the idea of their success, that you help them, to you. So when they succeed, everyone wants to succeed, right? They succeed, you're coming along for the ride with them. So this is how we go about building a brand where we're helping people and that relationship starts building. Now, I was lucky enough. I got to see Jay Baer speak a few years ago on his philosophy of utility. He's an amazing speaker. If you get a chance, go check him out. He talks about how, us shouting louder than the competition is not going to win. What we need to do is be relevant. So he asked the question, is your marketing so useful that people would pay for it? Now, you don't need to make people pay for it, but that's the question you need. Is it so useful that it has value that you would attribute a dollar sign to? Now, he does a lot of hilarious examples of bad marketing, including like someone who's shouting about used golf clubs over and over again. But ultimately, it comes back to the story of that individuals who go out and help create this useful marketing, and someone, without even realizing it, has started working with you. And when they go to next do something, they are built in. They could go start all over again, try to figure this all out, or they can come back to where they were last getting help about something. And that's how you start creating a longer relationship. Now, I wanted to do this. How do I do this for my company? So I had a team and we wanted to go out and help. And we knew that there was a lot of webinars, but they were gated, so it doesn't always get people in. And we saw that there was this educational YouTube channel, which was kind of dormant at the time. So we thought, well, why don't we make some videos? What if we just gave away helpful stuff, no strings attached, consistently for as many months as we could possibly do? So we got started. It took a while, but I wanted to be aggressive. I wanted to say, like, let's do a 50% target, right? I want to see an increase in views and monthly subscriptions every month, 50% more than what we did before. And it took us some months to like figure out what that plan was, how we would go about, what are the types of content we would want to do, start creating that stuff. And then about a December, January timeframe of that year, we started putting things out. And it was like an immediate explosion, right? We put things out that were helpful. People wanted to see it. They wanted to see more. So we kept putting stuff out. And I mean, it was way beyond anything we expected. We actually hit that ridiculous aggressive goal that I was searching for. So I said, all right, we're a well-oiled machine. Let's do that 50%, add 20% on more. Of course we could do that. So we tried. And we kept putting stuff out. We tried to get more variety. And wow, it was actually working. Just being helpful was huge in us being able to get a bigger audience. Now, we started seeing something all of a sudden, though, where sure, people were watching what we were doing near the end of the year, but how come we were growing at a slower rate? Like, people were still coming to join us, but not as much as what we had hoped. So we dug in and we looked like, oh, that was the time we decided we were too busy and we didn't put out as much stuff. And we changed our schedule and kind of let it go for a few months. Yeah. So I guess we have to keep helping, huh? So part of this is sustainability. We have to be able to keep doing it in order to keep having that success. The other thing that we noticed as we started going this through the years was variety. We had some content that was short, maybe on a hype topic, and it'd get a lot of views, but people would drop off. And then we had this other content that was getting very little views. So we thought, oh, it's not so good. But then when we looked at the engagement, people were going through like 45-minute sessions the whole way through. So it was extremely helpful for that small audience. So we knew we had to start doing different types of things for different people. Different people wanted different types of content. They wanted to learn different ways. And we couldn't just go all in whatever was going to have high views. We needed to have that stuff for the people who were going to be highly engaged. Because when we started helping them, we were seeing a lot more interaction. We were seeing a lot better response on those, even though it was a smaller set. So we just tried to keep on going with that 1 week at a time. Another thing we started doing is how do we go beyond just talking about ourselves? So I mentioned how the self-interest piece kind of erodes at the credibility. How can we go out there and talk about Docker or React or ethics, being able to just be helpful for the sake of being helpful and build up our own individual brands that way. So we've been trying to do this over the last several years, trying out different pieces. And my team and I are always looking, how can we take what we're learning and find the thing that's going to be helpful for more people? And this has been something that has been highly successful for us. Now at this point, some of you who've been here listening for this whole time have probably realized that this sounds great in theory. But how do I convince my boss? How do I convince my organization that they're going to put any kind of time into introducing advocacy into my organization? And one of the most common things about individual advocacy that people bring up is, what if they leave? See, the tricky thing about building individual brands is that it's individual. There is reflected trust that comes back on the brand of the person who has hired this, but a lot of that trust is going to get up and walk out the door if they walk out. So why would any organization invest in people, build up all this brand trust, and then have it walk out the door? So I like to point out a meme that went about, and it was about professional development. Like, what if they stay? Right? If you don't invest in people and they walk out, okay, you haven't lost a bunch. But if you invest in people and they stay, you have a huge benefit. So this is your risk reward type of thing you look at. It's been shown also that if you invest in team members, they are also more likely to stay. If you start telling people that part of their day job is going to be being helpful to people and being nice to them and, sharing information that's helpful, that's an environment that people want to work at, right? I talked about how people would leave a job to go to do the same job somewhere else that seems more like that. So this allows you also with employee retention. The other piece of it is that when you build that type of a work environment that people want to be in, even if they have to leave for some other reason, they're now going to go out and be an advocate for you, and you're not even paying them anymore because you've built up this good relationship with them. They're going to be going out there. They'll talk well about you wherever circles that they happen to go in. And so you're spreading yourself out and you're spreading your brand's reputation out as well. One final point I want to make on here is also about reputation. And that's, I talked about how there's reflected brand trust. So if you trust me, you'll more likely to trust my organization. But it goes beyond me as well. Microsoft is great at this. They've got like a few people who've been there a long time, but they can constantly rotate who the other advocates that are out there helping out, because there's this built up reputation that Microsoft is going to have a trusted advisor that you can trust because they've gone out and done it before. The next person who comes in inherits the reputation of the organization that's been built up. You are seen as someone who believes in being trusted, who believes in putting people out there, who will do the right thing. So there's a good benefit here of building up that reputation of trust. So even if you get past that thing of like, how do we invest in people? There's also the fact that this is not work that just happens. Anyone who has done marketing at all already knows that they're under some kind of content crisis and can barely keep up. So how are we going to add all this advocacy work on top of that? There's things like creating different social channel monitoring, traveling for events, writing blogs. All of this requires a time investment. Now, there is a benefit to spreading this out over more of the organization. But how's that ultimately going to work out? How does any given individual carve out time from whatever their normal job is that they're already stressed out about and probably don't have enough time to do? How do they do this? So the main thing to do is to not do a second job on the side. So a lot of people who first get into this, they can't get the help at work, so they start doing it on the side. They wind up doing two jobs, and it's a sure path to long-term burnout. I talked about sustainability. This means you have to keep doing it. And if you put yourself in a situation where you just can't keep it up, it's ultimately not going to work for you. Now, so you have to watch out for your own mental health on this. And if you're a manager and you have a team that wants to do this, you have to watch out for this as well. So ultimately, it's about balancing priorities. What's the highest return on investment for the organization? If the organization is committed to building up brand trust, then it's not lost time to go and build up brand trust. But there's certain activities that are going to be more valuable than others. And there's probably in the regular day job as well, certain activities that are more important. So managers and individuals need to identify what those are. Are there lower priority items that we could drop because there's a high priority trust building thing that we can do that's helpful for the organization and helpful for this individual? The other piece about focusing is differentiation. What is going to make you unique? Let's say you're really into the latest .NET release, and you go out and you write a blog that's just like 300 other blogs. Well, that really wasn't a good investment of your time. I mean, maybe it'll help you down the road. There might be a little bit of return, but how is that going to help your organization? What is it that you bring that is different? How can you focus on that piece? I think that is a very valuable way to try to determine where you go and spend your time on this. Now, you might be tempted to say, but there's so much automation. I could build a machine learning algorithm that could do most of this. And I've seen people do it. It's impressive that they can, but it doesn't actually work for building trust. So it might work to a certain extent in terms of doing normal marketing of social media kind of sharing and stuff like that. But at some point, the automation becomes visible, and any possible trust that you have built up immediately erodes away the moment it becomes visible. So it's a high risk attempt to try to make things fit. So I do want to say there are a few ways that you can try to look at this for scale. One of them, look at connected platforms, things that allow you to go between social tools or different areas, minimize the amount of time you're having to go and curate all this stuff. Another thing is don't try to do it all yourself. You've got a community. There are other people who know things. How do you become like a human router who just like when you see questions, you're like, yes, I can help you by taking you to this person who can help you, right? That's the type of way that you engage somebody. Another way related back to the safe space, people love to slide into your DMs. They're going to come in, they'll have some really specific question about there, and you're trying to help them. And then there's another message that's kind of similar, and you're trying to help them. Make it public, get it out there. If you can somehow transition this into some place that other people are going to see, whether it's in a Slack, on a forum, in a Stack Exchange, now you're helping other people. So you're scaling your answer to more people, but you're also scaling the number of people who can help in the future, because now the next time that question comes up, you don't have to necessarily be involved because a bunch of other people already saw how they could help. So make sure you're punching out. The other piece that we need is using digital. And 2020 taught us, wow, can we use digital for a lot? Here we are, virtual DNN summit, right? We can use digital to connect to each other, to help. It doesn't have the same feel as an in-person. The type of relationships you build are different, but you can reach a bigger audience. And like, I'm able to join you from my little office here in my second floor of my house, right? I didn't have to get on a plane this morning. This is the type of thing that makes it easier for you to scale and do more places. I'm going to go join a Copenhagen user group later today to see one of my team members who is in the Western US able to go and be in Denmark, right? There's an amazing ability for us to take advantage of here, and it's a huge way that you can scale. So now I've told you about what you should do and how awesome it is. I've told you about some of the challenges and how you can prepare for that. And you're like, yes, how do I get started, Jason? Tell me how. And I think the first thing you need to realize is you got this, but you need to talk to yourself about it. Have an honest conversation. Can I keep this up? What is it I want to do? Why am I saying that I want to do this? So Commit yourself. And then you likely want to talk to your manager, or at least someone who's kind of done this before, to try to get an idea of how do you balance out what you're doing and bringing this on. How do you bring brand advocacy into what you do as a professional? Once you've got a full view of this and what you want to do and why you want to do it, you're ready to go. You then have to start small. I love talking about baby steps, but incrementally doing something is always better for you. If you try to take on every single possible thing you could do all at once, you're just not going to be able to sustain. And remember, sustainability is key. So start small. When I started, I didn't have much time. I didn't know what I was doing. I was writing code at some product company, and I'll check Stack Overflow for 15 minutes in the morning, right? Eating my breakfast, check Stack Overflow, see if I can answer a question. It was sustainable for me at the time. Later on in my career, when I was more of a consultant, I decided I really love writing. I love writing. How can I do a blog? That seems to be a very good way for me to go out and help people, but also do something I like doing. And I made a mistake. I tried to write a blog every week. I could not do it. I just couldn't balance it in. I tried every 2 weeks, still wasn't working. I eventually found a rhythm that worked for me, where I kind of was doing it, monthly, every bi-monthly, and that worked. I was able to find a way to sustain it, and I've been doing it now for 7 or 8 years. And it's really helpful for me to have this outlet where I can write. So remember that sustainability is key. What is your early success that's going to drive you to do more? Find that small thing that you can do and overdo, and then build on it over time. Building on it also means you have to measure what's working. What's your impact? There's so many metrics out there, but find one that you like. And what you're looking at is, am I going up? Am I going down? This is going to help you understand if what you're doing works or doesn't. It's also going to help you spread message of your success. So you can go to your manager, you can go to your organization and say, hey, look at what I'm doing. Look at what I'm getting as a result. We should all be doing this, or you should at least give me more time to do it, right? That's the type of thing that you want to be doing. Make sure you're measuring. So now it's almost time for us to go and say goodbye, but hopefully over the last, hour almost, we've been able to get you feel ready to go out there, do brand advocacy, be kind of a better neighbor in your neighborhood. And remember those 3 things that I was talking about: being honest, being kind, and being helpful to build brand trust. So why don't we take a little moment though to do something I like doing, is hear your thoughts on this and how we could go about doing this better. And don't be afraid to, I think we request to be able to join the call. Is that right, Laura?
There's that nice request to share audio video up in the top right corner of your screen. So if you guys have any questions for Jason here.
Yeah, and Scott, I see you're asking for feedback. Feedback would be great. Any kind of comment you have that was either on what you saw or your experience with this, or any way that I might be able to help. Open floor. Oh, good feedback from Tom here. Admit publicly if you make a mistake. So important to transparency. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Jason. I'm a extreme introvert, so this is hard for me. But I just want to say that your discussion really spoke to me. And I probably am one of these people who are doing way too much. I work full-time for the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. I'm a programmer, but on my spare time, I guess, I also am running a website on DNN called Browser Quests, which is like an online role-playing game. And like yourself, I'm really into writing. I love to write stories, especially heroic stories. And that's what my game is all about. But your whole discussion here really spoke to me. I'm definitely planning to go back to my own management at my day job and talk about this, because here in Wisconsin, we do something called equity, where we're trying to raise awareness for all the kids in the state that some kids aren't equal with others. And I think that's a really important topic, but I really love the whole brand trust thing. I work for the finance department. Our goal is to actually disperse billions of dollars to all the school districts in the state. It's a huge responsibility. And I don't know if we always have the trust of the state. We do our best. We're just a small team of 13 people. So I just wanted to provide the feedback that I think the things that you're just talking about really hit home for me. And I plan to really take this forward.
Definitely. And you say you're working in the finance industry. I mean, trust could not be a bigger thing for you. And yeah, if you have some way of measuring the impact that you're having, and you can show this, it's like, hey, this could be valuable to us. We're a way to reach other people and make them feel like our organization values this and hires really good people like yourself, right? That's a way of like being able to show the face of the company of real people, and it's not just a website, or it's not just the branch, right? How do the real people who work at this get out there? So that's a great thing. I mean, you're obviously involved in a lot of great activities. So any way that we can have your organization recognize that and be able to kind of carve that into what you do every day, because there's probably ways you can relate what you're doing already into your actual day job as well. There's probably tie-ins that you can find.
I'm seeing several of them. So it's funny. I was thinking like, gosh, you're talking about something that has nothing to do with DNN. And yet I've liked this presentation the best so far.
Oh, well, thank you. I feel like it may not be specific to a product, but it's a lot of us use these products for an ultimate goal. There is something we are trying to do with the tools that are in our arsenal. And ultimately, it's about how do we connect with people wherever we are, right? We work for some company and we're trying to get people to want to be with us and want to work with us. And I think that's universal. And we all can do better at that. And I think a lot of us are doing as much as we can, but how do we do it more efficiently? How do we, get the recognition that this is something that as organizations we should do?
Can you post your blog on the chat here, just for those of us who might want to go out and...
Yes, of course. I would actually have that on a closing slide, but I might as well do some marketing right here.
All right, super. Well, thank you. I just wanted to pass that along.
Oh, that's great. And if there are any other questions, please feel free to join in. If we don't have any other questions, if folks are okay and want to have a little bit of an extra break before we wrap up, then I suppose now would be a good time for us to say goodbye, which is always a sad thing. So I like how Mr. Rogers always said goodbye. It was more of a see you later, right? And he did it also with song, just like with the starting. He said, "It's such a good feeling to know you're alive. It's such a happy feeling. You're growing inside. And when you wake up ready to say, I think I'll make a snappy new day. Such a good feeling, a very good feeling. The feeling you know that I'll be back when the day is new. And I'll have more ideas for you. And you'll have things you'll want to talk about. And I will too." Thank you, DNN. Have a great rest of day 2.